Hello, everyone. Tonight we are walking well, swimming into a place no one alive has ever visited. Imagine descending through warm prehistoric waters past forests of waving algae and glassy trilobites into a shadowed seabed that's not just alive, it's lived in. There are tiny stone circles, dimpled hollows, meandering ridges packed just so, and somewhere down here a fish is tidying up its doorway. You're not just floating through ancient water, you're trespassing. And let's be clear, you probably won't survive. There's a school of armored placoderms hovering behind you, and their jaws could bisect a lunchbox. But that's not tonight's story. Tonight's story is about a fish that didn't fight its way through prehistory. It built, dug, arranged, dreamed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know your location and local time down below. I like knowing where in time you are. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along the seafloor, boots crunching through brittle crusts of lime and sand. It's dark, but not black. The kind of filtered twilight that bends through 50 meters of ocean. To your left, a horseshoe crab the size of a sled drags itself into a shallow trench. To your right, something just vanished into the mud, but what stops you is what's directly under your feet. A circle, or maybe a bowl. Sunken perfectly into the seabed like someone scooped it out with a ladle. Around it, small stones placed in a neat crescent. At the bottom, nothing. No bones. No shells. Just silence. You take a step back and notice another and another, forming a staggered pattern like stepping stones for someone with gills and 6 fins. This is not a crater. It's not the result of burrowing worms or collapsing sediment. These are deliberate, clean. Someone or something lives here. The Devonian period, they call this era. Roughly 400 million years ago. And somewhere during that time, fish began doing something very unfish-like, modifying their environment with repeatable, intentional design. Building bioturbation. The fancy word for living things disturbing sediment was old news by then. But this wasn't just disturbance, it was planning. Historians still debate whether these were nest dens or something else entirely. You, on the other hand, have already dropped to your knees and started brushing back the sand with gloved fingers. You find a line of tiny shells all facing the same direction. You follow that line to a shallow channel just wide enough for a fist-sized fish to slip through, curving out of sight beneath a tuft of crinoids. You stick your light in. It doesn't reach far. Suddenly, something nudges your ankle. You spin around expecting a predator. But it's just a lazy striped coelacanth eyeing you like a grumpy landlord. He circles once and swims off unimpressed. Somewhere deeper in this bay, a very different kind of fish is at work. Flash forward a few million years, and by flash I mean slog through unimaginable geologic churn, and paleontologists will find this exact site preserved under a shelf of sandstone. They'll scratch their heads over the repeated patterns, the fossilized silt rings, and the careful lack of bones. At first, they'll argue it's all coincidence. Then someone will notice the spacing between pits is too regular, the orientation's too purposeful. There's a moment coming soon, well soon by geological standards, when someone's going to say it out loud. These fish built homes, the first ancient aquatic architecture. And you're standing in it. Now, let's talk fish. Picture a creature maybe a foot long, not a predator, not a show-off, but stubborn. Big head, stout body, maybe some armored plating along the sides. It doesn't blaze through the water like a shark or flash colors like a coral rossi, but it spends hours rearranging stones, clearing silt, and shoving debris out of its space with the quiet indignation of someone trying to keep their living room tidy during a sandstorm. That's what makes this different. Because across countless species, most animals either dig for hiding or nesting or arrange for mating. But this creature, who you'll meet in more detail soon, was doing both, and maybe more. You pause at the next structure. It's deeper, a spiral, like someone was building an underwater ramp. You wonder if this was some kind of trap or maybe just artistic flair. You'll find out later that these spirals show up again and again across fossil beds worldwide. And no, there's still no consensus on why. But even now, you get the creeping sense that this wasn't an isolated oddball. These were populations of fish across oceans and epochs, all participating in a strange shared instinct. Some use their tails, others their faces, but all with the same motive to make the world around them fit them better. Odd fact of the night, some species of modern pufferfish in the Pacific still build ornate geometric nests in the sand up to 2 meters wide. Just with fins and fury. So yes, fish can be architects. Judgy architects even. One wrong grain of sand and it gets flicked across the reef like it owes money. You rise slowly, letting the silt settle around you. The lights from your dive suit flicker gently over the stone formations. The hum of distant underwater pressure echoes faintly like an old pipe organ. Somewhere in the dark ahead, something is digging again. You shuffle forward through the haze, letting the current guide you into another stretch of seabed that looks off. Not chaotic, not messy, just planned. You've seen enough random scatterings of rocks, barnacle clumps, and coral reefs to know the difference between nature and intention. And this is intention. A broad groove slices through the floor like someone dragged a canoe through the mud then vanished. To the side, clusters of pebbles have been arranged in radial arcs. It's like a blueprint, but you're underwater and the architect had no thumbs. You kneel again. One hand brushes across the edge of a flattened shelf just a few centimeters tall. It's covered in tiny parallel lines like grooves left by a comb. These aren't erosion marks. You've seen the same pattern before, carved into fossil beds halfway across the world. Now imagine this. It's 390 million years ago. There's no light here, except what filters down from above, dim and green and lazy. A small fish hovers in the gloom, flicking its fins to stay balanced. It opens its jaw not to eat, but to push water and silt away. With short, deliberate jabs of its tail, it begins tracing a line through the mud. It isn't alone. Paleontologists today call them trace fossils. Not the remains of animals themselves, but the marks they left behind, burrows, tracks, nests. And sometime in the last few decades, these fossils began telling a new kind of story. In places like the Gogo Formation in Australia and the Rhynie chert beds in Scotland, researchers have found layered pits, concentric rings, and flattened chambers. Not chaotic, not accidental, repeating, modular, like bones were being used as blueprints. The fish that made these patterns weren't just swimming around, they were sculpting. Historians still debate whether these marks indicate true construction or some weird feeding behavior like licking algae off the same patch of stone every day until it looks like a Zen garden. But the evidence stacks up. Some pits show signs of maintenance silt, cleared repeatedly, walls packed tighter over time. That's not feeding, that's homemaking. And not every fish got it right. In one fossil slab found in Pennsylvania, 3 half-finished pits lie next to each other like someone abandoned them mid-build. Either they were picky perfectionists or serial renovators. You can practically hear one muttering underwater, "This current is all wrong. I need better flow-through." You rise from the groove and kick gently toward a low ridge. From above, it looks like a ripple in the sand. But as you angle your light, the detail becomes clear. There's a stair-stepped indentation, 1 tier, 2 tiers, 3. Almost like someone layered the mud intentionally. And then something clicks. This isn't just a home, it's a foundation. You wonder if they built up. Not just down into the seabed, but into the water column walls, ridges, maybe even domes. The structures themselves don't fossilize well. Soft materials collapse, vanish, melt into the sediment, but the bases survive. And here under your boots is one of those bases. Odd fact time, there are modern cichlids in African lakes that build circular bowers to attract mates, huge nests with ridges and troughs. But unlike birds, they use their mouths to dig and place every single grain of sand. You'd think fish would be bad at interior design, but some of them rival wedding planners with their taste in layout. You move slowly. Now, brushing aside the illusion of randomness, you begin to see the layout. This is a neighborhood, not in the human sense, no picket fences or water bills, but a grid of engineered spaces. Some are intact, others collapsed. You spot small trails connecting certain structures as if one fish visited another. And then you find it. A single fossilized fun print, just one frozen near the edge of a sunken ring. The toes, or whatever passed for toes, spread slightly at the edge, like the fish paused before diving in. It's barely the size of your thumbprint, but it holds the weight of a moment frozen for nearly 500 million years. It wasn't hiding, it was checking the floor plan. Historians still debate whether these creatures lived in these homes full-time or just returned to them occasionally like summer cabins. But the wear patterns suggest regular use, repeated pathways, repeated silt clearing, repeated care. You float upright and scan the rest of the field. It's strangely quiet now. Even the drifting detritus seems to pause, giving the structures their due. 1 fish, 10 fish, 100 generations, each one learning, copying, modifying. They weren't smart the way humans are, but maybe they were clever the way cities are growing organically, adding rooms, adapting with time. This part of the sea floor is a palimpsest overwritten again and again by generations of tiny aquatic architects. And just for a moment, you let yourself imagine, what if these creatures, these architects of silt and shell, passed down their building habits? Not through language, not even through memory, but through instinct so refined it might as well have been cultural. You pass a final circle. It's deeper than the rest. Perfectly formed, clean walls, no silt in the bottom. And dead center lies a smooth, flat stone, just one. No others around it. It doesn't belong here, and that makes it important. You mark the coordinates. This might be the first known foyer in fish history. You drift lower, drawn toward a section of the seabed that looks less like wilderness and more like a construction site. The water here is clouded with churned-up sediment, a soft underwater fog that blankets everything below your knees. Visibility drops. The silence feels thicker. You switch on your lamp and a wall of mud particles dances in its beam like underwater snow. Something just moved. At first, it's nothing more than a flicker, a blur of motion near the edge of your light. You freeze. Then there it is again, a flash of pale scales barely larger than a sardine. But it doesn't dart away like prey. It hovers, dips, tilts. Then, using its tail like a trowel, it carves a short groove in the mud. It's building. You've found the mud engineers of the Devonian deep. These creatures don't have names yet, not proper ones. Paleontologists slap Latin syllables on them when they find the bones, but what matters now is what they do. This fish, the one working right in front of you, doesn't just dig a pit and call it a day. It returns. It inspects. It reinforces. And you're about to see that process firsthand. It begins by sweeping the bottom. Short strokes, rhythmic, like it's brushing dust off an old shelf. When it finds a clump of silt that's too loose, it packs it tighter, using a shimmying motion head to tail like a vibrating wire. Then it lifts a small pebble from the edge of the trench and places it beside another, careful not to disturb the slope. If this fish had a tape measure, it'd be using it. The structure slowly takes shape, a bowl-shaped depression with slightly raised walls. Not too high, you wouldn't want the current dragging debris in. Not too low, or it'll collapse under its own weight. It's not random. It's tuned. You recognize that now. This is engineering at the scale of instinct. Historians still debate whether these fish understood their own construction or if evolution just wired them to do it by accident. But if it's accidental, it's the most obsessively well-repeated accident in natural history. Odd fact break. There's a species of bowerbird in Papua New Guinea that builds spiral nests filled with blue objects, berries, bottle caps, even stolen clothespins. And it'll rearrange them constantly until it feels the balance is right. Sound familiar? Back underwater. Your little architect doesn't like your attention. It glances up, flares its gills once, then disappears under a nearby ridge, probably to sulk or lodge a mental complaint with fish zoning regulations. But its home remains, and around it you begin to see others. Some older half-collapsed, their borders faded into suggestion. Others fresh, clean, proud. It's not just one fish, it's a community of builders. And these homes vary. Some are single bowls, some have secondary depressions connected by shallow trenches like entry and exit points. A few look almost like labyrinth spirals or winding channels that twist inward, perhaps for eggs, perhaps for defense. No two are exactly alike, but all follow the same principles: containment, stability, control. You drift over one particularly elegant trench. Its walls slightly slanted, lined with tiny shell fragments like someone's idea of rustic flooring. You reach down and tap the base. It holds, packed firm. Reinforced from below, maybe, you'll never know. Unless you begin to dig. A few careful scrapes later and you uncover a second layer beneath the first. It's older, rougher, a foundation. This fish didn't just build it, renovated. One generation reusing the work of the last. You've just found the Devonian equivalent of a basement. You have to stop and laugh. Here you are 400 million years before drywall, and you're staring at a multi-level structure designed by something with no hands. One section over you, notice the environment shifting. The current picks up just slightly. The sand gets finer. The homes become shallower, wider, more open. It's as if these fish were adapting to the water around them. Some paleobiologists think these structural shifts were environmental feedback loops, instincts shaped by surroundings then inherited. Others think the fish were experimenting, evolving, like a bunch of underwater architects arguing over open floor plans. You kneel near a half-constructed circle and pick up a fragment of siltstone. Embedded in it is a faint spiral pattern. Not a shell, not a burrow, a groove. Purposeful, like a measuring line etched by a careful fin. Or maybe a test, the beginnings of a wall that never got finished. Maybe the fish died. Maybe it got distracted. Maybe the rent was too high. You linger in the dim silence. Then you hear it again. That low shuffling. A distant scratch. Another fish is building. It reminds you of those long road trips when you pass through a quiet town just past twilight. You don't see people, but the porch lights are on. The chairs are dusted. Somewhere in those homes, someone is still sweeping the floor. That's what this is. Not just biology, not just instinct. This is care. The care of a creature that knows somehow that space matters, that walls make a difference, that shelter changes everything. You float back toward your entry path, careful not to disturb the fresh trenches. Behind you, the water settles again, gentle, unbothered. Ahead, a new structure begins to emerge from the haze, like the foundation of a forgotten village slowly remembering itself. The next patch of seafloor feels lonelier. Not abandoned, just more personal. Sparse, isolated craters dot the landscape, like tiny moonscapes, each one sitting a respectful distance from the others. You stop swimming and let the current nudge you forward. Something's changed here. There's less noise, less movement. But the structures, if you can call them that, are still here. Each depression is tidy, not elaborate, just deep enough to slip into and curl up. If you were, say, the size of a plump trout with trust issues, you're in introvert territory. Your suit's light catches on something flickering ahead. It vanishes. Then just barely you see a round head poke out of one crater. Two beady eyes, a ripple of gills. Then poof, it ducks back in. You scoot closer, hovering just above the sand. Another one peeks out, clutching a pebble in its jaw like a dog with a favorite chew toy. It eyes you. Slowly, deliberately, it backs into its den. You don't take it personally. These aren't social fish, they're homeowners, and extremely private ones at that. Historians still debate whether this behavior was defensive territorial or simply antisocial. But either way, it left behind clear evidence crater homes' single occupancy and all strangely consistent in size. Not identical, but close. About twice the length of the fish that built them. Enough room to turn to sleep, to sulk, maybe even to store things. You angle your light into one of the deeper craters and squint. There it is, a stack, well, not really a stack, more like a clump of rounded stones. Pebbles. Yes, but not random. Not scattered. Clustered deliberately near the inner curve of the pit just beneath the overhang. Like a pantry. That's right. Some of these fish hoarded. Pebbles, shells, even the fossilized remains of other smaller animals, whether as food or trophies, no one knows. But the positioning suggests it wasn't just leftovers. These were stored, tucked into recesses, hidden. You imagine the fish glancing side to side before depositing a particularly shiny pebble, then covering it with a fin sweep of mud. The first safe deposit boxes in history. Odd fact, some modern gobies, those tiny bottom-dwelling fish you'd barely notice at the pet store, are known to collect debris to cover their burrow entrances, acting like underwater doormen deciding who gets in and who doesn't. One species even uses discarded bottle caps, which is either ingenious or deeply tragic. Back here in the Devonian, though, bottle caps don't exist, but paranoia, absolutely. You move to another crater. This one's different, narrower, sharper walls. You lean in and see deep interwoven scratches in the surrounding silt. It looks like something tried to seal itself in. A defensive trench. A panic room. Whatever it was hiding from it probably wasn't the neighbor. These fish keep their distance. Most craters are spaced a consistent distance apart, as if by instinct each fish said, "This much space is mine, thank you." It's like walking through a quiet suburb at dusk. Every house the same size, every mailbox untouched, not a single porch light on. One depression draws your attention because it isn't empty. At the bottom, nearly fossilized, lies a skeleton perfectly preserved in the curve of the den. Ribs tight, spine curled. This fish died at home, and nobody moved in after. That's the weird part. Many of these craters remained uninhabited long after their builders disappeared, as if no other fish wanted someone else's house. Some paleontologists think it's olfactory memory chemical cues left in the mud saying, "Mine. Stay out." Others argue it's just bad luck or superstition. Can fish be superstitious? Probably not. But one academic paper from 1996 offhandedly described the phenomenon as an underwater culture of solitude, which is about as poetic as science ever gets. You pause and float in place, watching the gentle sediment shift around your boots. There's a melancholy here, a quiet tension. These fish weren't crowding into reefs or spawning en masse like modern-day sardines. They built, hoarded, and vanished alone. And yet, that's what makes this part of the narrative matter. Because building something even in solitude is still an act of hope. A decision to stay, to shape the world around you into something manageable, comfortable, safe. The wind picks up, or at least the underwater version of it. A slow shift in the current tugs at the silt, pulling it into lazy spirals. The small craters begin to fade, their walls collapse inward. The stories vanish one by one, buried by time. You look back once, catching the last glimpse of a pebble pile before it disappears beneath the rolling tide of history. You wonder if it meant something, or if it was just something to hold. Either way, it stayed hidden for nearly 400 million years. That's devotion. You follow the slope of the seabed into a shallow basin, expecting more of the same lonely fish holes, maybe a few forgotten baubles. But this spot is different. The floor curves in strange ways too deliberate to be natural. Your light catches an angular ridge, then another. They connect. Straight lines, three of them forming what looks like a corner. A corner, you freeze mid-kick. Corners don't happen by accident underwater. You hover closer, brushing away the top layer of silt. Beneath it, smooth-packed mud. Repeating shapes, hollowed tunnels, a central depression with three branching alcoves like a miniature apartment carved from wet paper. Welcome to Ichthyovilla. That's not its real name. Its real name, of course. No fish submitted blueprints, but whoever built this, they went beyond a bowl in the sand. This is a compound, a prehistoric fish bunker, and it's got features. There's the main chamber, wide, shallow, and clean, likely the living quarters. Off one side, a narrow tunnel ending in a dome. A nesting room, maybe. Or a food stash. The floor is patterned with overlapping fin marks. But the really strange part is, the third offshoot angled slightly upward curved into a tight spiral and ending abruptly. It's capped with a single stone. A pressure trigger. A sealed exit. Historians still debate what these offshoots were for. Some say mating rituals, special display chambers designed to impress. Others think they were emergency tunnels, ways to bolt if something ugly came knocking. There's even a theory that the chamber orientation matched the magnetic field, basically fish feng shui. You're inclined to believe all of it. The fish who built this wasn't just hiding. It was planning. Probably around the size of a cigar, heavily scaled with forward-set eyes. It didn't chase prey or wander much, but give it a patch of mud and it'd build a kingdom. Odd fact, in modern Japan, a species of pufferfish builds massive symmetrical sand circles on the ocean floor to attract mates. Delicate ridges carved for days which wash away within hours. Nobody taught them. They just do it. Your ancient builder had no YouTube tutorials. And yet, here you are staring at a floor plan with more thought than most studio apartments. You scoot around to the back of the structure. Here, a second entrance is partially hidden under a ledge. It's angled lower, possibly for drainage or stealth. A predator swimming overhead would never spot it, but someone inside could escape in seconds. Call it an attack door if you like. You do. You whisper it underwater. It feels right. You can't shake the sense that this fish was watching everything, anticipating, preparing. Maybe it wasn't intelligent the way we define it, but it understood space, risk, traffic flow. Maybe it even understood comfort. One chamber has a pebbled floor, flat uniform stones pressed tightly together. You rub your glove across them. They're smooth, polished. Worn downs, from repeated rubbing, a sleeping mat, or just fish with a preference for solid footing. You can practically hear a little gurgling voice mutter, "Sand gets in the gills." You lean back, taking in the whole structure. It's beautiful, modest, functional. Someone lived here, cared here, spent hours reinforcing the same stupid corner wall because it kept caving in. You get it. Life doesn't change much. Then movement. A flicker behind the wall. You angle your light and see something large, larger than the builder, glide past the back tunnel. A hunter. Long fins, wide mouth, a face like a boat anchor. It sniffs the entrance, swirls the silt, then veers off. Too big to enter. And you realize this design worked. That fish survived because of what it built. There's a principle in ecology called niche construction, when organisms alter their environment in ways that affect their survival. Most animals do it by accident. But this fish, it did it with purpose. This was more than instinct. This was adaptation sculpted into architecture. You pass a second villa, smaller. Still multi-roomed, still thoughtful. Maybe it was a juvenile, or maybe just a fish with fewer resources. One chamber holds a broken shell carefully wedged between two rocks. Useless unless it meant something. A trophy, a lure, or dare we say it, a decoration. You don't have the answer. No one does. But you write it down anyway. In your field notes underlined twice. Decoration emotional attachment. With 2 question marks. That's how it starts, academic chaos. A third home sits partially collapsed nearby. Its walls crumbled inward tunnels filled with sand, but the outline remains. You recognize the same layout. These weren't one-off creations. They were taught, or at least imitated. Passed down by observation repetition, maybe even subtle cues we'll never understand. And isn't that the first spark of culture, repeating what works, adding your own twist, telling the world I was here? I lived like this. You rise slowly, dust trailing from your boots, and take one final look at the cluster. Ichthyovilla, home of the unspoken, the first builder who stayed. The water darkens, not by much, but enough to notice. The kind of shift that says a storm's coming. Underwater, though, storms aren't flashes of lightning or booming thunder. They're slower, heavier, a change in pressure in current. A message whispered through millions of gallons of water, hold on to something. You feel it before you see it. A deep humming pulse in your chest. The sediment shifts slightly underfoot, and from the northern edge of the basin, a wall of darkness begins to roll in, slow but certain. A silt storm. It's not dramatic at first, just a gentle push of particles through the water like a dust cloud in slow motion. But you've read the records. These storms can blanket entire regions in minutes. They can erase months of fish labor, flattening trenches and filling homes in one sluggish, muffled breath. You kick into motion, angling upward toward a small outcrop. Below, in the soft glow of your lamp, you see them structures, dozens of them. A whole miniature city of builders scattered across the floor like a broken circuit board. And they're about to be buried. The fish aren't panicking. That's the eerie part. They're working faster, sure, sweeping more frequently, reinforcing walls. One darts out, grabs a pebble, drops it precisely at the base of a slope, then disappears again. But none flee, none abandon their post. You watch as the first wave hits. A rolling surge of sediment tumbles over the basin edge. The outermost craters vanish instantly. No fanfare, just gone. Like a hand smoothed them over. Then the storm pushes further, swallowing one home after another. Your lamp can't even keep up. The water thickens into soup. You brace against the outcrop and focus on one structure still standing, a reinforced chamber near the center. Not the largest, not the deepest, but different. Its walls are higher, its floor angled. Tiny channels lead outward from the base, directing silt away. And it's working. As the storm surges over it, the incoming debris is redirected, sliding around the sides, eddying harmlessly into the trenches. Whoever built this knew the storms came. You feel the pull of admiration, and maybe a tinge of sadness. Historians still debate whether these storms were seasonal tectonic or the result of predator disturbances. Some suggest massive filter feeders stirred the silt in search of food, sending avalanches through the mudflats. Others blame sudden freshwater inflows. But whatever caused them, they were deadly to the unprepared. The basin disappears, just like that. Every trench, every crater, every home, gone under a blanket of ancient dust. Except one. The reinforced shelter is still visible barely. The storm batters it like a silent blizzard, but its design holds. You catch a glimpse of the fish inside, hunkered low fins spread against the walls for balance. It watches the storm unblinking. Odd fact time during underwater volcanic eruptions, some modern eels retreat into self-dug mud tubes where they'll stay for weeks without food until the danger passes. They don't run, they dig in. You understand now. This wasn't just architecture. It was strategy. You record everything you can. Every measurement, every angle. You won't get a second chance. And just as quickly as it began, the storm slows. The water clears, faint outlines emerging like ghosts. The fish in the reinforced chamber stirs, creeps forward, peeks outside. It flicks a bit of silt from the tunnel entrance and resumes cleaning like nothing happened. You breathe out a low, muffled laugh into your helmet. Builders are stubborn, but the rest erased. The craters you studied earlier gone. Pebble stacks gone. Decorations, tunnels, exit paths flattened, like pressed flowers. In another 1,000 years, maybe something will dig down and find the outlines. Maybe not. You move in closer to the lone survivor. Its floor is scraped clean. Every curve reinforced by ridged fins. Says, pebbles pressed into the walls like buttresses. It's not elegant, it's brutal, functional. The architectural equivalent of holding your breath and clenching your jaws. But it worked, and now you see them too faintly. 3 smaller chambers around it, less intact, less thought out. Copycats, perhaps. Apprentices. They didn't survive, but maybe that's the cost of innovation. Someone has to build first. Someone has to test what holds. You rise above the basin, staring down into the blank space where 100 stories once lived. It's sobering. The fish won't mourn. But you do. Because for every survivor that adapts, there are 10 that didn't get the timing right, didn't build the walls thick enough, didn't understand that the sea can forget you in a single breath. But the ones who did, they passed that knowledge on. By fin, by instinct, by trial and repetition. You hover in silence. And then from the western edge of the basin, a new fish arrives. Tiny, wide-eyed. It circles the last standing shelter. Then in a puff of silt, it begins to dig. The water is calmer now. No silt storms, no predators. Just a long, lazy drift of particles catching the glow of your lamp like underwater fireflies. You follow the trail of fine ridges left by that new fish, the one who started digging after the storm. But it doesn't build like the others. It doesn't reinforce a wall or dig a pit for safety. Instead, it does something stranger. It starts collecting. At first, it's pebbles. No surprise there. Pebbles are a fish's version of duct tape. But then it brings in a strip of plant matter, soft fibrous, already decaying. It weaves this into the center of a cleared circle. Then another piece. Then a curved bit of bone, then shell fragments, a feather-like fin spine. And then it rests. You tilt your head. Is this a nest? The idea shouldn't feel so modern. But here it is, a soft-lined cradle at the heart of a reinforced depression flanked by angled silt walls. It's not defensive, it's inviting. The kind of place you'd want something delicate to grow. Eggs, maybe. Historians still debate whether these structures were hatcheries or just coincidence, an efficient, warm space that happened to be good for laying eggs. But the clustering of fossilized embryonic remains inside these pits strongly suggests intent. Not only did some ancient fish build homes, they designed them as nurseries. And then you spot it. Another fish, smaller, rounder. It swims slowly, cautiously toward the nesting structure. The builder doesn't chase it off. Instead, it shifts to the side, clearing a space. A mate. You've seen documentaries of modern sticklebacks building nests and luring females into them with delicate zigzag dances. Males guard the eggs, obsessively fanning them to ensure oxygen flow. And here in the Devonian, that instinct may have already existed. Even before lungs, before legs, these weren't just homes. They were family planning centers. The mating display begins slowly. One fish glides in tight arcs, stirring up just enough silt to shimmer. The other circles, hesitant. You watch spellbound as the builder flicks its fins and nestles into the center of the cradle. An invitation. Odd fact in modern seahorses, it's the males who get pregnant. Eggs are deposited into a pouch where they're fertilized and incubated. Evolution doesn't follow blueprints. It follows possibility. And here the possibility is sheltering your offspring from a world that mostly wants to eat them. Back to the present, or rather the ancient present, you notice something even more subtle. The nest is arranged for visibility. The pebble arc at the front gently slopes, offering a clear line of sight outward. A watch post, but behind the nest, the walls curve upward, creating a shaded cradle. its layout with purpose. Some paleobiologists think this suggests spatial memory. The fish remember their own structures, returning to the same nesting sites each season. Others argue it's pheromonal, a chemical draw to familiar ground. You suspect it's both. The fish feel the shape of home in their bones like a compass that doesn't point north, it points back. You float above the nest, careful not to cast a shadow. The mating pair rests quietly, their bodies curved in mirrored symmetry like a living yin-yang. You wonder how long they'll stay. How many generations will follow? How many nests will be built on top of this, one layer upon layer, until the structure becomes history itself? The silt shifts faintly behind you. You turn. Another fish, smaller still, is starting a nest 10 meters away. It's not a copy. It's inspired. The walls are steeper, the floor messier. The pebble arc is too sharp, but the idea is there. Architecture as imitation. Imitation as instinct. You drift back, giving them space. It's tempting to interfere, to mark the nest with tags or insert a tracking chip, but this isn't a zoo. This is a cathedral. One built in mud and patience and the unblinking hope that tomorrow might be kind. You hover there longer than you should, watching, listening to the hush of water over stone. The thought occurs to you, this fish will never know its work is seen. It will never know its cradle outlasted empires. That someday, someone with boots and a notebook would call it extraordinary. But it still builds, because that's what it was made to do. Because maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the pattern of its bones, it believes that life deserves a place to begin. The water here is murkier. Not dirty, just unsettled, like someone stirred a spoon through a teacup of ancient dust. You slow your approach. Something's not right. The craters are intact, the tunnels crisp, but something about the arrangement feels tense, uneasy. You drift over one home and feel it immediately, a scrape in the silt, deep and recent, not natural. A scuffle. Then you see them. Two fish, same species, Esselwin. Same general shape, but the one on the left is larger with a patch of missing scales along its flank, recent damage. The smaller one moves quickly, nervously, circling a half-built structure. The larger fish follows, then darts forward. The smaller fish flees into a trench. The bigger one dives in after it, kicking up a plume of silt that drifts toward you like a puff of smoke from an ancient argument. You've just witnessed a prehistoric property dispute. Historians still debate how territorial these fish were. Some fossil beds show spacing between structures like polite suburban zoning. Others reveal signs of overlap, intersecting walls, collapsed tunnels, scattered pebbles that suggest a fight or a theft. And that's what's happening here. You settle behind a ridge and watch. The smaller fish returns first, circles its half-built den and begins rebuilding. But it's not just placing new pebbles, it's checking them, one by one, as if the last batch was stolen, which, as it turns out, it was. The larger fish reappears 20 minutes later. Yes, you watched the whole time. What else are you going to do? Check Instagram. And in its jaw, a pebble. A very specific pale-colored egg-shaped pebble that you saw earlier in the smaller fish's den. It's a robbery, and not the good kind where everyone ends up with a learning experience. This is theft, plain and simple. A shiny thing was taken, a home was interrupted. Boundaries were ignored, and the fish doesn't even seem sorry. Odd fact, male cichlids in modern African lakes have been observed stealing nesting materials from neighbors during the night. They wait until darkness falls, then zip in and grab mouthfuls of sand or decorative stones to boost their own mating appeal. No apologies, just business. Back in Devonian time, the smaller fish does something remarkable. It doesn't flee, doesn't hide. It swims toward the thief and charges, headbutting the larger fish in a soft thud of scales. No real damage, but the message is clear. This home is mine. The big one retreats. Not far, just enough to signal fine, whatever. It drops the stolen pebble passive-aggressive style, then swims off into the haze. The little fish circles twice, then grabs the pebble in its mouth and shoves it back into place like someone slamming a door they don't actually want to break. You mark the coordinates in your notes. First known case of fish-on-fish larceny. There's a story here. Maybe dozens. You pass another set of adjacent homes. One appears slightly larger with a ridge that reaches into the neighboring pit just far enough to cause friction. The silt in between is churned. The walls show reinforcement. You can almost hear them arguing over boundary lines. That rock was on my side yesterday. The weird part is that these disputes seem ritualized, limited. No torn fins, no broken bodies, just squabbles, repetitive, familiar, like they're used to this, as if even conflict at this level of evolution had structure. You wonder how far it goes. Were there pecking orders, social ladders? Did older fish get better territory, or was it first come, first dug? Maybe it was about strength, or speed, or how many pebbles you could lift in your mouth at once. Then something clicks. You pass a home far off to one side, much larger than the others, but sloppily built. Pebbles just dumped, not placed. A wall half-finished. A trench that goes nowhere. And you notice fish swimming near it but not into it. It's been abandoned, but not empty. There's a smaller fish inside. Not the builder. A squatter. No nests. No organization. Just shelter from the current and maybe a few scraps left over. Even in prehistory, the saying holds true. Build it and someone else will move in rent-free. You laugh softly inside your helmet. Odd fact, in modern reef systems, abandoned goby burrows are quickly overtaken by worms, crabs, and opportunists. Nature hates an empty room. And maybe that's what's happening here too. Not every structure remains sacred. Some are reused, stolen, rewritten. Others are marked avoided, perhaps for reasons you'll never understand. Still, you can't help but admire the persistence. Whether it's for mating shelter or bragging rights, these fish keep building. Even if their work is undone. Even if their neighbors are jerks. You float back, tracing the perimeter of a small cluster of disputed homes. One ridge, two circles, a trench between them. And in the center, a single shiny pebble. Nobody touches it. It's like a peace offering. Or a marker. A symbol that says this space is contested. But let's not push it today. You log one last note. First signs of diplomacy. You chuckle. Probably not, but still. It stayed there. And they let it. The current is picking up again. Not a storm, not even a warning, just enough to make the pebbles rattle faintly beneath you. You drift through a shallower stretch of seabed, expecting the usual scatter of craters and trenches, but what you find instead are decoys. Dozens of them. At first glance, they look like homes. The same circular depressions, the same pebble borders, even what appears to be a tunnel entrance. But something's wrong. You drop lower and examine the floor of one. It's shallow, too shallow. A dig and a half's worth of effort, then abandoned. No reinforced walls. No second chamber. Just a hollow. Empty. Suspiciously empty. You find another. Same problem. It's neat but lifeless, like a movie set, convincing from a distance, useless up close. And then you spot the real one. It's buried slightly off-center, hidden behind a tangle of algae-stained rocks. Its crater is deeper. Its entrance obscured. You wouldn't have noticed it unless you were looking for a place not to look. Clever. Historians still debate whether this was intentional deception or just unfinished projects. But side-by-side comparisons of fossil beds reveal clear differences between decoy structures and true shelters. The fake ones are consistent, shallow, exposed, repeated. The real homes, varied, fortified, hidden. In other words, the fakes were fakes on purpose. You've stumbled upon a fish trickster. Odd fact, some birds like killdeer pretend to nest in decoy sites, leading predators away from real eggs by feigning injury near fake nests. Deception, it turns out, is ancient, and tonight you're watching a fish version of it. You hover over one such decoy, trying to imagine how it might have worked. A predator enters the territory, a big-jawed placoderm, or a lungfish with an appetite for movement. It sees the obvious depression, pokes around, maybe even bites. Nothing. Empty. Meanwhile, the builder safe in the real den nearby stays perfectly still. The decoy takes the hit. You move again, tracing a zigzagging trail through the sand. 5 decoys, 2 real homes. All within the same 30-meter radius. It's a maze not just for camouflage, but for confusion. Like a magician's sleight of hand, only with mud and patience. One home even has a tiny rock formation nearby, like a stage. Elevated slightly, you float above it, puzzled until you realize the angle of the walls behind it perfectly curved, like an amphitheater. Acoustics unlikely, but maybe visibility, a mating display. Modern-day cichlids often use platforms of cleared sand to show off to mates. They'll perform dances, flare fins, vibrate in subtle patterns. And decoys help keep rivals confused. If everyone's watching the wrong spot, you get the girl and keep the house. You watch a fish dart between 2 fakes. It flicks a small shell into one of them, then disappears into the real home. It's placing props, building scenes, making the world harder to read. You scribble a note in your log: decoy architecture eals fish misdirection theater, then underline it twice, because you're enjoying this way too much. You circle back to a more complex setup. Here, the decoys aren't just shallow, they're interconnected. Short trenches lead from one fake pit to another. At the end of the chain is a real home concealed under an overhang. The pattern looks like a trap. You float above it and think, that's a funnel. A predator could waste precious seconds searching fake den after fake den, never realizing the builder is already long gone, darting through a side tunnel and out a hidden exit. And sure enough, you spot a back door. A trench so narrow it disappears into a shadowy crevice lined with pebbles like breadcrumbs for the builder, invisible to the intruder. It's elegant. It's ruthless. It's brilliant. You think back to a long-ago biology lecture where someone once claimed fish weren't smart. No cortex, they said. No imagination. You wish you could drag that person down here and show them this a labyrinth of fake homes, false starts, and concealed tunnels, all engineered by a creature that weighs less than a sandwich and still knows how to lie. Odd fact time, cuttlefish, those squishy, floppy-faced marine geniuses, can change their skin pattern to distract or confuse enemies. But they also fake out rivals during mating. A male might pretend to be female to sneak past dominant males and mate with unguarded females. Evolution loves a good scam. The fish below you shifts again. You catch a glimpse of its eyes unblinking. It sees you, watches, waits. Then it darts not into the real home, but into a fake one. Stays there, still. You hover in place, blinking. It's baiting you. This fish just tried to trick you. You laugh. Because how else can you respond? You with your high-tech helmet, your sensor array, your notebook full of theories just got outwitted by a jawbone with fins. You back away, slowly respectful now. This isn't just survival, it's strategy. Theater, illusion. And somewhere in those murky little neural circuits, this fish figured out that sometimes the best way to stay safe is to let the world chase shadows. You head east along a faint underwater ridge, letting the slope drop beneath you. The homes here are closer together, almost overlapping. You count 5 pits within a few body lengths of each other, too close for comfort, especially if you're the kind of fish that likes alone time. You adjust your course, drifting low over the seafloor, and that's when you see it. Damage. Not erosion, not age. This is fresh. One crater has a collapsed wall. Another has its pebble ring scattered outward, like the aftermath of a tantrum. A trench is smeared through, both carved roughly, as if someone forgot it was supposed to be a tunnel and used it as a battering ram instead. You've stumbled into the aftermath of an underwater neighborhood meltdown. It happens faster than expected. A flash of scales, a sharp flick of movement to your left. You barely register it before two fish collide mid-water, each trying to body the other out of the same hollow. They're not trying to kill each other, just evict. One fish flares its fins, the other bites at the water in frustration, then spins into a tight loop to defend its spot. You float back, giving them space. This is real estate war. Historians still debate the full purpose of these disputes, whether they were territorial mating related or just the Devonian version of get off my lawn. But the physical evidence is clear. Some fossil beds show clusters of damaged structures, broken walls, even fragments of pebble rings that appear smashed apart. And they're always found in dense housing zones. You watch as one fish wins the battle. Not dramatically, just persistence. It shoves the other out and reclaims the central crater. Then it turns nose up and begins repairing, like nothing happened. Odd fact, modern reef fish like damselfish aggressively defend algae patches they don't even eat just to maintain territory dominance. Some even attack divers. Yes, divers. Like you? You glance behind you, half expecting a bold little damselfish to ram your helmet with a face full of attitude, but no, you're safe. For now. Below, the victorious fish starts dragging pebbles back into place, one by one, rebuilding, while the loser circles nearby, clearly not over it. You've seen that look before. It's the ancient fish version of, I'm just resting my fins here. Not doing anything. You'll slip up. And maybe it will, because a few pits over, a third fish, smaller, smarter, sneaks into the loser's now vacant crater. No damage, no fight, just opportunity. A squatter. The loser doesn't even notice at first. It's too busy eyeing the victor. And by the time it turns around, the squatter is already rearranging furniture, so to speak. You swear the defeated fish makes a face. Probably just your imagination. But still, this isn't just random chaos, it's a cycle. Claim, defend, rebuild. And if you can't win, wait for someone else to lose. Welcome to the first known case of property ladder drama. You circle higher, trying to take in the whole scene. It's a mess, but a functional mess. The craters are densest here, maybe because of environmental pressure, maybe because of food availability. Or maybe some fish just like the drama. The damaged crater you saw first already patched. Mostly. The victor is rearranging shell fragments now, not for utility, but decoration, a victory lap. You float to the perimeter of the cluster and find something unusual. Two connected pits, not just close-joined. A shared wall, one entrance, no signs of damage, no dominance behavior, just two fish sitting in opposite chambers doing their own thing. Roommates. It seems unlikely. Fish aren't exactly known for cooperative domestic arrangements, but here it is. A rare case of shared space, and it looks peaceful. Historians still debate whether these dual pit setups were accidental or intentional. Some suggest they could have been mating pairs, one guarding the other resting. Others think it was parent and offspring. But a few brave paleontologists have proposed the idea that it was cooperation. Primitive, functional, unstable maybe, but possible. You want to believe that? That even here in this ancient undersea suburb of squabbles and petty theft there were alliances. Odd fact, clownfish live in anemone colonies with strict hierarchies. Largest is female, second largest male. The rest are future replacements. If the female dies, the male becomes female. Cooperation with a twist. Back in the Devonian, the roommates ignore you. One is flicking algae off a pebble. The other rests quietly, tail-curled, watching. There's no fight, no flared fins, just quiet cohabitation. You drift up once more, recording the coordinates. Not every story ends in conflict. Some just work. No explanation needed. You wonder how long it will last. The seabed grows uneven again, rising and falling in soft undulations like the folds of a forgotten blanket. You drift into a shallower section where the homes seem off. Some are half-collapsed, others distorted, stretched like wet clay pulled in strange directions. And then you see one larger than usual but misshapen, with its entrance widened and its floor hollowed out far beyond necessity. You approach slowly. There's something inside. At first it looks like a piece of debris, but then it wiggles really. You angle your light and reveal a segmented body, pale and soft, slinking out of the old crater like it just woke up from a bad nap. A worm. Not the builder, just a squatter. You scan the area again. Another pit. This time it's crawling with tiny shelled creatures, crustaceans, probably scooping up algae and flinging it like toddlers in a sandbox. The original owner is long gone. Or eaten. Or maybe just evicted. You've entered the neighborhood of parasites, freeloaders, and bad roommates. Historians still debate whether these invaders arrived before or after the builders were gone. Some fossil sites suggest cohabitation, layers of biodebris footprints, and fecal traces overlapping in the same pit. Others point to a sequence: fish builds, fish leaves or dies. Worms move in, everyone throws a party no one remembers inviting guests to. You float above a particularly sorry-looking crater. It's wide, shallow, and buzzing with activity, but not fish. Worms, crabs, even a limpet inching across the floor like it owns the place. The only thing missing: the architect. This one was overrun. Odd fact. Modern hermit crabs will kill snails just to steal their shells, and then fight other hermit crabs over upgrades. And when they move out, dozens line up in a literal queue ready to jump into the better property. Nature doesn't have landlord laws, just opportunity. You spot a narrow trench leading away from one of the overrun homes. It curves sharply, then ends in a small intact chamber, new, clean, and very much fish-sized. Inside, a single eye glints back at you from the dark. A survivor. The fish twitches slightly. Its gills flutter. It doesn't move, just watches. Quiet. Waiting. It left. Escaped. Instead of fighting off the squatters, it started over. It didn't try to reclaim the crater it built. It just walked away. You wonder what it took to make that decision. Below, the parasite party continues. Algae has begun to bloom in the outer ring. The crabs have made it a kitchen. The worms have made it a hallway. The fish who built it would never recognize it now. Some paleontologists call these repurposed shelters bioturbation hives, places where once single homes become ecosystems. But others reject the term. They argue it erases the fish's intent. A house is not a hive, one paper scolds, as if the fish might come back and sue for defamation. But the line is blurry. If a structure gets reused enough times, does it matter who built it? Or does the sea just recycle shelter the way it recycles everything? You hover above another pit, this one half flooded with green fuzz and bits of shell. A pair of shrimp-like creatures are locked in what looks like a wrestling match. You're not sure if it's fighting or mating. Maybe both. You back away. One crater to the left shows damaged, scalloped ridges along the wall, like something gnawed at it. A burrowing parasite. A mistake. You record the pattern anyway. Later, you'll find the same ridges in other fossil beds across the globe, but no one will agree on the cause. Parasites are the ghostwriters of evolution, always present, rarely credited. Odd fact. The tongue-eating louse Chimothoa exigua crawls into a fish's mouth, eats the tongue, then becomes the new tongue. Just lives there, forever. Gross, yes. Effective also, yes. You float slowly, letting the chaos unfold below you. This isn't architecture anymore. It's entropy. The slow reclamation of space by the opportunistic, the uninvited, the adaptable. And yet, there's order to it. Some of the craters have been reshaped, walls, smooth floors dug deeper. Not rebuilt. Repurposed. One even has a layered floor, fish silt below, worm castings above. You can read it like a history book. Page 1 Builder. Page 2 Squatter. Page 3 Colony. Maybe that's how all homes end. Not with collapse, but with reinterpretation. You pass a final crater, one with both a fish and a parasite inside. Not fighting, just existing. The fish fans the silt. The parasite clings to its fin. It could leave, but it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't know, or maybe it's made peace with the arrangement. Bad roommates are still roommates. You rise slowly, leaving behind the mess. The fish may abandon their homes, but their blueprints live on, even in the fins of worms. You're in the quiet zone now. No storms, no squabbles, just a soft stillness as if the sea itself is holding its breath. The homes here are spread out again, no overcrowding, no overlap. Each one isolated, almost reverent. You pause above the nearest crater. It's old, not in ruins, just worn, smoothed by time as if 100 fins have passed over it without a word. And yet this place feels familiar. You've never been here, but it feels familiar. Then it hits you. You've seen this layout before. Back near the beginning of your dive in another basin far from here. Different fish, different fossils, but the same shape, same wall gradient, same offset tunnel. These fish, they came back. Historians still debate whether early fish possessed true spatial memory, the kind needed to return to specific places season after season. But mounting fossil evidence suggests some did. Identical structures appear in strata separated by years, not copies. Repeats. The same homes rebuilt in the same places with the same personal flourishes. That's not just instinct, that's memory. The fish who built this crater may be long gone, but the next one knew. That found the same ridge, the same patch of firm sediment, and rebuilt with the precision of someone following an internal map. You float down just above the surface and run your gloved hand across a smooth lip of silt. It's been used before, packed down, repacked, maybe even shared over time. This is tradition pressed into mud. Odd fact. Modern salmon famously return to the very streams they were born in to spawn. Scientists believe it's a combination of olfactory memory and magnetic field mapping. Whatever the case, it's specific. Not just this region, this exact spot. And maybe the fish here did the same. Not just following chemical trails or water temperatures, but seeking the exact shape of home. One crater even shows signs of layering several floors compacted atop one another. You float over the rim and find a sequence of faint outlines, stacked like pancakes. Trench circle, trench circle, trench. 5 versions of the same floor plan, each slightly shifted. The fish kept coming back. Kept fixing, kept remembering. You turn and spot another maybe 20 meters away. The same shape again, but newer, crisper. Its outer wall is reinforced with a ring of pale pebbles. You've seen that ring before in a completely different site hundreds of kilometers away. The pattern is spreading. Cultural diffusion. Could fish have culture? Historians flinch at the word. Culture implies teaching, community, symbolism. But what if it's simpler? What if one fish figures out something brilliant and the rest just follow? Not because they understand it, but because it works. And slowly, over generations, it sticks. You pass a narrow trench leading between 2 craters. It's not a tunnel, it's a path. Worn down, packed smooth. Not just walked once, walked often. A route, a habit. And habits are the skeletons of memory. Odd fact time, desert ants, creatures barely a few millimeters long, can retrace their steps back to the exact hole they left hours earlier across hundreds of meters of featureless sand. House sun angle, step count. Earth's magnetic field, you name it. Their brains are pin-sized, and they still remember. So why not a fish? You drift now slower, letting the rhythm of the sea guide your thoughts. Maybe memory doesn't need a hippocampus. Maybe you don't need language to have a sense of place. Maybe knowing here is enough. You circle back to one crater that's particularly well worn. No fish inside, no parasites either. Just a hollow, empty, clean, and yet it feels lived in. Like someone left a chair still warm. You kneel at the edge and press your hand into the mud. The floor gives slightly compressed but not solid. It holds the shape of your fingers for a few seconds before settling back. You wonder if it remembers you now too. Then movement. A fish sleek, bronze-scaled, appears at the edge of the trench. It stops, stares, then glides in, inspecting the crater from a distance. It doesn't go inside, just circles once, twice, like it's thinking. And then it leaves. Maybe this one's too worn. Maybe it'll come back later. Maybe it's not ready to stay. But the structure stays, waiting, as it has for generations. Through storms and squatters and theft and time, waiting for someone to remember it, waiting for someone to come home. You sink toward a curious patch of seafloor, shallow, smooth, and eerily uniform. From a distance, it looks like any other muddy flat, but up close, the surface changes. It curves, gently, intentionally. A dome. You drift your hand across it. The arch is perfect, not just erosion or a sediment bubble, but a constructed shape. Not flat like a crater, not rough like a trench. Curved, hollow, held together by pressure and hope. You're looking at a ceiling, a fish-built ceiling. Historians still debate whether these dome-like structures were functional roofs or collapsed accidents. After all, underwater construction doesn't favor overhead spaces. Gravity isn't as punishing down here, but it's not absent. Still, here it is, a span of arched silt supported by small stones arranged in a ring at its base. A keystone-less vault, fragile, delicate, intentional. You brush away a bit more silt. The chamber beneath is cramped but dry well relatively. The mud inside is more compacted, almost baked, like it was compressed over time by something resting inside. A sleeping chamber, a brooding chamber, or just a desperate gamble to stay hidden. The overhead dome has a narrow vertical ridge like a spine. It's not decoration, it's structural. Weight redistribution. The first primitive blueprint for an arch. You lean back and whisper, "Did they dream of ceilings?" Odd fact: termites build ventilation towers with natural arches that rival cathedral engineering. And those termites blind. Tiny. But they work as a collective, these fish alone. Yet they figured out something just as beautiful. One dome cracks slightly under your movement. You freeze. Then back away. The structure holds, but you've pushed it close. And you know when these collapse, they vanish completely. Nothing left but a smeared memory in the mud. And yet here it stood. Until now. You backtrack to another. This one smaller, lower, more hidden. A tiny arched chamber that opens to the side, not the top. You angle your light, and your breath catches. There's someone inside. A fish, small, motionless, not scared, not even alert. Just resting. It blinks slowly, then shifts its fins, adjusting to the light. You realize it's positioned under the center of the arch, directly beneath the highest point. A spot protected from the pressure above. The safest part of the dome. It knows. You glance around and see another structure. Collapsed. A similar curve half buried. The chamber within is filled with silt, but you can still make out the shape. A half-dome crushed. Someone gambled on architecture and the sea called its bluff. But this one's still standing. Odd fact: some species of wasps build paper nests with multi-chambered domes inside, designed to regulate temperature. There's no instruction manual. Just inherited instinct, refined through failure. And maybe that's what this is too. 100 failed ceilings, 1,000 collapsed domes, until one held, and the fish underneath slept safely. You wonder what it's like resting beneath a ceiling you built, knowing that if it fails, there's nothing but mud and gravity waiting above, and building it anyway. That's not just instinct, that's faith. You examine the wall supports, small flat stones embedded at slight angles like vertebrae. They're not randomly placed. They distribute load across the curve, preventing sag. It's fish buttressing. You don't laugh, not this time. Because this isn't funny, it's awe-inspiring. This is the first shelter from the weight of the world. You circle back above the dome, letting your light fall gently across the arch. The fish inside doesn't move. It trusts the roof it built. You hover there longer than you should, reluctant to leave it. You know this dome won't survive the century. Maybe not the decade. One tremor, one storm, and it'll be dust. Silt in the water, forgotten. But for now it stands. The first ceiling. The first chamber where something fragile curled up under something fragile and slept. The trench is shallowing. The mud is thicker, older, more compacted. You feel it beneath your boots. This is where things end. Not in chaos, not in fire or flood, just in stillness. Ahead lies a single chamber. It's low to the ground, almost level with the surrounding floor, and half curled into a rocky fold like a sleeping animal. No trenches lead to it. No spiral paths or pebble trails. Just a hollow, quiet, and alone. You kneel beside it. The walls are preserved softly, caved but still intact. Their edges glint faintly where the silt has worn thin, revealing compacted mineral deposits as if time pressed down and left a fingerprint. This one didn't collapse. It was left. Historians still debate whether such abandoned chambers were retreats, grave sites, or simply structural failures that went unrebuilt. But this one tells a different story. The floor is swept clean. No debris, no parasites, no invasion. It wasn't overrun or buried. It was finished. You step down gently and crouch inside. The chamber cradles you small but deliberate. You feel a soft echo in the space, not sound but pressure, like the air inside a sealed room. It holds. There's a single object in the center, not a pebble, not a bone, just a small arc of smooth stone, pale and polished, too round for coincidence. You lift it slightly and turn it in your hand. A token maybe, a keepsake, or nothing at all. Odd fact, chimpanzees have been observed stacking stones at the base of trees. No one knows why. It's not food. It's not defense. It's just something they do. You wonder if this little stone was something like that. A final touch. A parting gesture. You rise and look out through the chamber's entrance. The seabed beyond stretches blank and empty. No fresh construction, no trails, just the long level plain of time. This is where it stopped. Not because it failed, not because it wasn't useful anymore, but because something changed. The builders moved on, or faded, or evolved into something else entirely. Maybe they left the sea, maybe they followed different patterns, or maybe the water just stopped rewarding what once worked. The chamber remains, a reminder, not of what was lost, but of what was learned. You drift upward slowly, the light dims, then settles into the familiar green gold of filtered water. You glance down once more at the final structure, and for a moment it almost glows. Not with light, with quiet. You imagine the last builder, tired maybe. Careful, not rushing, smoothing the walls one final time, setting down that polished arc. And then, without ceremony, swimming away. Not everything leaves a legacy. Not everything survives. But sometimes what was built in silence lasts longer than anything shouted. You rise past old trenches, old spirals, old hopes etched into the sea. And for the first time in hours, there are no new structures, no outlines, no signs of rebuilding. The ocean forgets. But you won't. You hover in stillness. Then without speaking, without marking, without disturbing another grain of silt, you turn and swim away. They built in silence. At the bottom of ancient seas where light faded and pressure ruled, there lived creatures not known for their brilliance, but for their persistence. Fish not predators, not travelers, but architects of the mud. They shaped the seabed with purpose. They dug chambers, lined trenches, stacked pebbles, wove spirals. They returned season after season, each generation refining the last. They built not just to survive, but to stay. Some built craters for solitude. Others carved nurseries and courted mates with shaped sand. Some fought over territory, stole pebbles, or left decoys to confuse. And others, perhaps the most remarkable, began raising ceilings against the weight of the world. These were not random behaviors. They were patterns, repeated, honed, whispered forward in the language of instinct. But time shifted. Storms came. Squatters moved in. Builders vanished. Slowly the homes emptied. The trenches blurred. The spirals faded. The fish that built them, they stopped. Not all stories end in fire or ash. Some end in stillness. Yet the homes remain, buried in fossil beds, imprinted into stone. Silent records of the first species that looked at the mud and thought, what if this could hold me? And now, having seen what they left behind, you understand the ocean forgets. But some structures resist silence. Some shelters carved in silt and stubbornness speak louder than any fossil ever could. You're further from the start now than you ever intended. The trench beneath you winds slowly into a shallower shelf of ancient seabed, dull in color and mostly flat until you spot it. Not a structure, not a crater, a pattern. From this angle, it looks like a spiral. Soft, winding, imperfect in its loops. But as you descend, more of them come into view. Spirals. Dozens. Etched into the mud like a language. They're not tracks. Not feeding trails. You hover closer, brushing silt from one curve. The grooves are too uniform, too evenly spaced. Each spiral starts wide, then tightens, curling inward into a compact, coiled center. Not art, not accident intent. You found the fish that draw. Historians still debate whether these patterns had purpose beyond the aesthetic. Were they guidance systems, mating signals, camouflage? Or just like so many things in the fossil record, a mystery with no satisfying answer. But one thing is certain, they weren't random. These weren't fish wandering aimlessly in the mud. They were following something, and whatever it was, it left behind loops, arcs, geometry so precise it could make a mathematician weep. You pass your light over one spiral and notice faint dots between the curves, spaced evenly, deliberately. Markers, landing spots. Maybe these weren't just paths. Maybe they were instructions. Odd fact. The golden angle 137.5 degrees shows up in the arrangement of sunflower seeds, pine cones, even hurricanes. Spirals like this appear across nature. But this one, it was carved by a fish. You float above a larger spiral, now one whose groove leads into a central pit. You follow it like a slow-motion roller coaster spiraling inward, the trench deepening, tightening, and at the very center a depression, circular, clean, sheltered. A home, not just geometry for beauty or confusion. This spiral funnels. It pulls current in a slow vortex, drawing silt and detritus outward, leaving the center clear. It's passive filtration, a self-cleaning welcome mat. You blink. That's engineering. There's no predator lurking, no other fish in sight. Just you and the spirals. You rise slightly and scan the seabed in every direction. More spirals. Some tight and shallow, others wide and stretched like unfinished attempts. A few interlock, sharing arcs like co-authored poems. One is shaped like a double helix. Another ends abruptly mid-curve, as if the fish stopped midway and thought, no, not this one. Maybe even frustration or artistic crisis. You laugh. Odd fact. Japanese pufferfish carve radial mandalas in the sand to attract mates. Perfect symmetry. Days of labor, all to impress a passing partner. And yet, here in the Devonian, fish were drawing spirals long before the puffer had a name. Maybe it's always been this way. Maybe evolution whispers in curves. You kneel beside a spiral with particularly deep grooves and press your fingers into the lines. They match your hand span almost exactly. It's a strange moment, touching something built by a creature with no hands. The thought occurs to you, what if this was language? Not in the alphabet sense. Not words, but messages. Like leaving footprints or building a flag. A spiral says someone was here. A repeated spiral says someone keeps coming back. And a whole field of them. That's a sentence. You turn slowly in place, watching the spirals blur into one another. The longer you look, the harder it is to separate one from the next. They seem to connect, interlock, fold inward and outward at the same time. You get dizzy. You let go of gravity for a moment, letting the water hold you. The patterns whisper in loops, in soft curves, in something like math but older. Not logic, memory. You float above the last spiral and glance down. The pit in the center is undisturbed. Nothing has moved through here in millennia. And yet it feels alive. Like the fish who made it just stepped away for a second. Like you're trespassing. You lower a marker into the mud beside it. Not to claim it, just to remember it. You won't publish this spiral. Not this one. Some things deserve to stay quiet. Even geometry.